So I think most people would agree that Studio Trigger has gone from being the little studio that could to being arguably the biggest anime studio in the world. This may seem a little crazy at first, seeing as they only do one show a year, but remember, each anime they've done has been one of the biggest anime of its respective season, and also one of the most talked about shows of its respective year. That's a pretty big accomplishment considering how many other studios are out there. So needless to say, when their newest anime, Darling in the Franxx, was coming out, there was a lot of speculation and a lot of hype, especially because the marketing for this show showed what looked to be a darker Trigger show, a little bit more deeper, complex, and with giant robots and stuff, which is always cool. And plus, they had the backing of A1 Pictures, arguably the biggest studio in all of anime, basically handing them a blank check and saying, have fun. So, when this anime premiered, a lot of people didn't know what to expect. And, well, kind of like their three previous shows, this became the biggest anime around. That's right, unless you were living under a rock that was under a mountain, you at the very least knew this show was out. Everyone was talking about it. When crazy stuff happened, everyone was like going nuts over it. This was the biggest anime of the first half of the year. But was it deserving of this? Honestly, in some ways, no. Because ultimately what sold this show was Studio Trigger. You see, at this point, Studio Trigger is the biggest star of their own shows. That's not to take away from their plethora of likable characters, great animation, good work with meta humor, and amazing design sense. But ultimately, Studio Trigger sells itself. As for the show's quality, well, kind of depends on who you're talking to, because as of this recording, this anime is very polarizing, and the general opinion of it seems split right down the middle. That's what I'm here to talk about today. I'm here to really judge Darling in the Franxx on its merits and how the show actually was. Never mind its controversies or the general thought of toxicity when it comes to its fan base. I did do other videos about that and some general reactions to episodes as they came out, which is in the comment section below, or the description below. I would have kept doing them, I just ran out of time, so here we are to sum the whole show up and give an honest-to-God review and opinion of it. So let's start off with the show's plot. The show pretty much takes off in a setting we see all too much these days, post-apocalypse. Yeah, it's another one of those sort of young adult, world is in the hands of these teenagers as they fight in this sort of dystopian society where the adults rule everything, blah, 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 blah. Fortunately, though, this is done with Trigger's own unique sense of animation and design aesthetic. The way this world is shown off is very clever. You're told nothing when episode 1 begins. You're thrown right into it. You barely even get a character introduction. The way the show throws you into it is so jarring and all over the place, you know you gotta keep watching. The world has this very uneasiness to it. There's this very real sense some horrible shit happened, and if you keep watching, you will get there, but you gotta keep watching. This was ingenious. It used to be that when anime came out, it did that. It just threw you into it. You just kind of got into this big adventure. But unfortunately, I believe, due to the oversaturation of media we have nowadays, it does feel like there's a lot more hand-holding in world building. A lot's more straightforward. I mean, hell, the amount of, like, isekais that are just, it's with a video game type setting, is just really, in my opinion, really made something like this feel needed and wanted. I love the way you're presented to this world. And from there, you meet the characters. This show follows like 10 teenagers who are basically charged with keeping the world safe from these monsters called Klaxorus. The Klaxorus, many people liked them. I thought their designs were a little iffy. They're just sort of standard giant monsters that are trying to attack the cities people lived in, which now are big moving domes that just kind of travel over the wasteland of the extinct Earth. And our characters are pretty much introduced as being, well, that. They pretty much are just these child soldiers who pilot robots in teams of 2 as they try and protect the adults who we barely even meet. This whole show is pretty much run by these kids. And of course, our main character, Hiro, whose big sort of dilemma is that he wants to feel needed, he wants to feel useful, he wants to pilot a robot with his friends and teammates, but he unfortunately can't really work well with anyone anyone, not because he's mean or anything, he's just having a problem, until he meets everyone's favorite waifu, or at least as far as the internet's concerned, 02, a mysterious horned girl who does a lot of weird shit, and for some weird reason can pilot with Hiro. Do you learn why these two can do this? Yeah, but the build-up is kind of the fun of it, so take that for how it is. From there, you'd expect that this is just going to be a big robots versus monsters type show, a big brawl type thing, and though there are some amazing fight scenes in this show, ultimately, this show isn't really about its action or the mechs. This actually is a character drama. The show actually is more focused on just following our 10 characters as they kind of navigate through this very bizarre, strange world. You're on this journey with them, and it never forgets that. So because of this, the characters have to be pretty likable and have to be able to keep you invested. Fortunately for me, they did. No one here is particularly deep or super dramatic or even really that original, but fortunately Trigger's down-to-earth sensibility to how characters work really comes into play here. Though everyone is simple, they take advantage of this. No one is too serious, everyone has a nice sense of likability, they spend a lot of time on their individual personalities, generic though they may be, and I think it really combines itself with the general setting and atmosphere of the show. It's a very dark show with a lot of deep, scary moments in it, but what sort of makes it work is that it has this really laid-back atmosphere to it when it's time to just hang out. There's no immediate the world is going to be destroyed here, it's just dealing with weekly adversaries. So because of this, you can do things like spend a lot of time on just them relaxing, interacting with each other, arguing, getting along, fooling around, all this stuff, and for me, I really liked that. I liked spending a lot of time with this cast. They were very likable. The cast had a lot of good chemistry, and everyone's really well acted. I think it's a testament to Trigger's ability that they can have all these interesting worlds, yet also spend a lot of time on making you get into all their characters and really getting into their heads and liking them. My favorite character had to actually be Ichigo, who is actually the show's most polarizing character. I really liked her sensibility. She's basically the leader, and pretty much they spend a lot of time just on what that's like for such a young girl to have this big responsibility. I never really felt like anything with her was too forced. I always really felt her drama was natural, and I really felt like she was very relatable. The cast all has these two. I just think for me personally this worked best. I actually wasn't super crazy about 02. I found her to be fun, but she felt very standard for this kind of thing. She's the typical weird for the sake of being weird. She's got secrets and all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, I did enjoy her as the rest of the cast did. I wasn't too crazy about the adult characters in this. There's not a lot of them. They don't get a ton of screen time, but it felt like the show didn't really know what to do with them. From there is amazing action in this, great worlds. You do see a lot, but unfortunately this show has some problems, and sadly, the strength of the cast and characters is part of the problem. You see, for a while now, and I've addressed this before, Trigger's biggest issue is that they fall too in love with their own toys. They like just being in their worlds and just exploring and experimenting and sending the characters off on crazy adventures, that they have a tendency of forgetting to actually build a plot or execute anything, and that is nowhere worse than in this. Maybe a little bit worse in Keys Naiver, but especially because this is building up to something big throughout the show, and it kind of never felt like it satisfyingly got there. That's because, though we spend a lot of time on these characters and a lot of times on the world building itself, when it's time to answer questions and really deal with the big serious stuff, we never really get there. Like, for instance, we spent a lot of filler episodes on the kids, and even though I enjoyed these, it felt like when it was time for big, serious stuff to happen, it just kind of was rushed and was vomited out. It very much felt like the writers got too invested in just exploring the kids' personalities that they forgot that they were building up to this big plot, to the point where we get a big revelation episode that succeeds at kind of telling you nothing you actually want to know and destroying all the world building. This is such a huge problem in this that it really took me out of the show when it happened. The show never lost me, but I couldn't help but feel that it sort of shot itself in the foot quite bad. Also, the finale's a little slow and boring. It felt right, and I did enjoy it. A lot of people didn't, but ultimately I do get why people had problems with this. And ultimately, if you're looking for a big action spectacle, there are amazing fights in this, but considering how it resolves, you're not going to get that. This feels like Keys Naiver. If you're looking for one specific thing, it feels like you're never going to get it. This show is basically just a chemical concoction of whatever sort of crazy idea, and we're just kind of left with what is a good, but ultimately kind of a mess. That being said, I personally really enjoyed Darling in the Franxx. I really liked the characters. I really enjoyed the action. I thought the drama was well done. The animation is top-notch. The weird waifu robots are a lot of fun. I think this is one of those anime you need to see for yourself. You really need to check it out and get involved in all the craziness. There's a lot of it. I personally liked it, but I do understand why a lot of people don't, because like I said, it is kind of a mess. That being said, I do love the fact that the first half of 2018 was sort of ruled by anime original content. Between this and Megalobox being the two biggest animes of the first half of the year, I think it's a good sign for where creativity in anime could be going, and I can't wait to see where these creators go next. But do you? Tell me below what you thought of Darling in the Franxx, if you like the plot, if you like the characters, if you like the story, or if you thought it was bland and a little generic. I definitely understand that argument. And as always, click to like, click to subscribe, and tell me what you're looking forward to this summer.